Hi and good evening from Ljubljana, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We're all really excited for the Q&A. So first of all, congratulations on the excellent film. Leave No Trace has got many layers and it addresses various social issues, such as living on the edge of society, father-daughter relationships, homelessness, veterans affairs, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And some of these subjects define your previous films as well. So I want to know what is that draws you to these topics and these kind of characters.
Oh, you know, I am interested in stories that come from everyday life. Is the volume fine?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the stories that I hear, that I see, that I notice, that themes that I'm watching happen, in the society around me, those are the things I'm trying to figure out. What stories could involve those themes? I hear stories. I'm attracted to stories from everyday life. And so I do try to make a combination of what's really happening, which is social realism, but trying to find a way to develop characters so that the stories can be told in a way that is really a story, that's different than a documentary, that you're organizing reality. So, so social realism is my wheelhouse, and so everyday life as it happens now interests me.
Leave No Trace is based on the novel My Abandonment by Peter Rock. What did you find so exciting in the book that you decided to develop it into a film?
I thought it was very mysterious. The novel opens with this father and daughter living in a public park undetected. Just even the word undetected, that's a loaded word. Why do people want to live in a way where other people can't find them? Why do people want to live so differently than the mainstream? So those were mysterious questions that, how would you do it? What's their life like? What is he seeking? What is she seeking? So I felt like it was a really rich story that had a stack of questions that I was interested to find the answer. Or even if you can't find the answer, to find some answers, some clues.
Okay. Could you say that you started making the film out of curiosity for such themes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think curiosity about survival is like a starting place for almost every story. How will they survive?
Okay. And what do
they need? How will they get it?
Yeah. What did the preparations for the film look like, and how did you find the locations, and how did you research life on the edge of society? Was it all already clear in the book, or did you have to do your own research?
Definitely had to do my own research. I live on the East Coast of North America, so this was all on the West Coast of North America, which is in the Pacific rainforest. You saw what kind of forest it is, right? You saw that it's really tall trees. It's a very specific kind of forest. It rains every day because of that kind of climate zone. And I live in a much different kind of landscape. So I had to go out there and I had to see what he was describing. I had to see where they lived. I had to see the city of Portland, which I didn't know. So the research was very extensive. It was like asking veterans about questions about where they go, what kind of medicine they get, asking social workers, what would you do when you found this? Asking the police, how would you handle this? Would you use a dog? How would you use the dog? So for everything, we had to ask questions. What farm is available? It turns out that the Christmas tree was the biggest industry in that area. So we had to ask a Christmas tree farmer, and he performs in the film. You see him; he's the foreman at the tree farm, because he knows the language of like what trees are acceptable, what trees have to be trimmed. The same with the teens with this agricultural club with the rabbits. Mm-hmm. We asked the real teens, how do you do your rabbit care? How do you I had wanted to even go further and show like a contest, a rabbit contest. But this is not stuff I know, so I have to ask. And for all the films I get involved with, that's like a really pleasurable part of preparing, right? Is to ask people who have real experience in their life, because you know everybody only has a few experiences, and you have to rely on other people to tell you what they found, what they did.
Okay, about asking, are there any questions from the audience? Okay, no. The film is very sincere and very authentic, also in regard to the relationship between the two main characters. Thomasin McKenzie and Ben Foster's performances are stunning, even more so considering this was Thomasin's first film role. How do you direct your actors? What sort of preparations did you go through?
So they, both those actors had a chance to live in the forest, and we had a skills trainer, a person who was extremely accomplished, you know, really successful at living outdoors. And she told them about how to light a fire when the wood is wet. You know, she told them what they could eat in the forest. She told them how you would build an emergency shelter. She showed them. And so they spent time in the woods with her, and they spent time in the woods by themselves, and they ate some meals. Ben was really interested in learning how to light the fire with this the metal stick, you know, to make the sparks. Tom was becoming really good at using her knife. So those were all things that they could do on screen, but they did them as real life training. And then it made it much easier for them to use those things during the film. I always like a lot of process in my film. I like to see how people really make something. So that training was really good. With a beekeeper, Tom spent time with a real beekeeper. And the beekeeper trained her to be able to touch the bees. What are some other examples? In this teen shelter, one of the girls in that scene had real experience. She was in foster care. You know, she was in like an orphanage, and she knew some of these activities. She knew some of the ways that girls might talk. So the preparation was to expose Tom to real people and have her learn from them, and the same with Ben, and then to have them have this rich time together to rehearse with each other.
Yeah, regarding the Tom's character, was Thomasin also involved in the development of her character, since she's a teenager and she's growing up in the film as well?
Yeah. I would say yes. Tom put a lot of thought, you know, and a lot of imagination into what it would be like to not use social media, you know, to be a teenager that doesn't use social media. She put away her phone for a long time, you know, just try to separate herself from her real life. She would tell me when certain lines didn't make sense, and maybe a different way she might approach it. So she was always developing her character, always really learning, and then really adding that into her work.
There isn't a lot of dialogue in the film. The father-daughter relationship is more defined through small gestures and actions. How did you construct the narrative?
So I like working that way, you know. I mean, you know, I would say that, you know, I had the benefit of being taught filmmaking, you know, from someone who grew up in Eastern Europe and who has huge respect for the traditions of Eastern European filmmaking. And that's what he taught us. You know, he's like, you don't need to say everything, you know, you need to show it in small gestures. And neorealism is also social realism also relies on the gestures a lot. How people are really responding to social pressures and tensions and conflicts. It's not always what they say. Other people might talk a lot, right? A teacher might talk, or a lawyer, or certain professional people that need to talk, and maybe they'll give some of the information. but the main characters don't really need to talk a lot, usually, unless that's part of their character. But in this film, it was not. And you know, in some ways, I had to make sure they were talking enough. You know.
Any questions from the audience?
Hi, I would like to ask you, what was your favorite scene to film, and what did you try to tell the audience with that scene?
Favorite scene? Wow, I haven't been asked that. Do you mean like fun to film, like easy to film because it was like things worked well on the filmmaking front, or because I like the content? Do you think, like, are you asking more about like a scene that worked well on the logistics and technical front of filming, or because I was excited about the content?
Because you were excited to show us something different, something that you felt deeply to show us. I mean, something that you really liked.
You know, I really like the scene with my, call him my friend because I know him from a previous film, but with the young man that wanted to live in the really small house. And the reason why that scene meant a lot to me is because that is his real dream. Like he, you know, he's really aware that for like most working Americans, you know, this idea of an American dream has been really downsized, you know. I forget what the French call it. Degrowth or something? Does that ring a bell? Degrowth? You know, the opposite of growth, degrowth. And I felt that Isaiah, that young man, because it was his true dream, even if he can't speak so easily about it, and he's not a slick communicator, you know, I knew that was really what he was imagining. I knew that he really wanted to live in a house like that. And I liked him trying to tell Tom, this stranger, you know, why he was building it, what he hoped it would be. But also it's really tender because those hopes, they're modest, but they're also really hard to achieve. You know, they're his dream, as small as it is actually hard to get to. So, and it also deals with some iconography or symbolism from American culture, which is the idea that, you know, there's all this space and you can live as this individual with all this space, but really it's super hard to find. So it was like the bittersweet, you know, the bittersweet of who he is, because he's a very you know, he's a gentle, good person, and it's like suspense of whether he can ever get what he wants and what he needs. Will he ever get there?
Any more questions? Yep.
Hi, Debra. Again, thanks for taking out the time to talk to us. You already mentioned that the American dream is sort of being downsized, and obviously you spent a lot of time with the most marginalized class in America, the homeless. And I was wondering, what do you think the things are? How do you think the whole homelessness situation is developing? Do you see the things getting better, worse, staying the same?
I think it's continuing to become, you know, it's becoming more and more severe, more widespread. I think I always wondered, you know, like what was it like when all the different empires of history fell? You know, I mean, they fall fast, you know, like crumbling societies, you know, and we, you know, all of us have lived in different versions of that. You know, your parents have, you know, saw such incredible changes in their life, right? Like, you know, all your kin have lived through unbelievable changes in Europe, and I think it's very hard to take the notes while it's happening. You try. But I will say right now I'm working on a project that deals with men that have just come out of prison. And that's another, particularly intense American theme, which is we have a huge incarceration rate. We have the highest incarceration rate in the so-called developed world, or in any world. And so being unhoused after you've been incarcerated is a really intense part of coming back out into society, like where you're supposed to go. And the fact is, it was probably convenient to put 2.3 million people inside prison, get them off the streets, lock them up. But then when you let them out, where do they go? So it's something that's really very vivid in my world right now, which is filming men who were actually trying to solve that problem. And, watching this one man that we're watching, earn like $213 a week, but his rent is $200 a week. Just seeing him try to do that, I mean, it's crushing. When people say, "What is suspense?" To me, I'm living like in a overly intense, suspenseful film by filming this man, because every week I'm like, what's he going to do? And, the obvious question that hangs there is, well, what he does know how to do when he's very, very hungry is he does know how to steal, right? He does know how to, but, what are we asking people to do? What are we asking them to do in order to survive? So the homeless thing, the homeless question, the homeless phenomena, the homeless statistic is, I would say, it hovers over every single minute of life. Where are people supposed to go? And where is it legal to be?
Thank you. There was one more question. No? Anyone else get a question? Yeah.
Hello, I have one question. You have left the end open, which is, of course, how a movie needs to be done, with clues that could lead to anything. But in your fantasy, do they ever see each other again?
Well, that was something that was unexpected. I really appreciated that when I had a chance to talk to people that viewed the film. I thought it was such a rich, almost like the results of a psych exam, because like half the people that saw this film would say to me, "Oh, it's very clear to me that they see each other again. She's put up this bag of supplies because she knows now that that's a way to maybe be helpful to someone who's living in the woods. Maybe he didn't go too far. She made that sound, as if maybe she knows that he's somewhere there, And then other people take a more visual, literal interpretation of the ending. When the last time that you see him, he disappears, right? You really can't. The frame holds, but when he goes into that brush, you can't see him anymore. So I've heard both sides really strongly, but I know you're asking me what I think. I'm someone who, under all circumstances, I am someone who wonders about hope, like always wishes that there could be hope. And that's one funny thing I will say about, my stereotype of Eastern European storytelling versus the forced obligatory hope of Americans, some Americans, vanilla Americans. Because this teacher that I was telling you about, he went to film school in Moscow and years ago, and he would say, Americans cannot bear to end a story with tragedy. No matter what, that's why we have like the idealized hero who, basically walks out, usually walks out of the danger or out of the gunfight or whatever it is. We can't handle our protagonists dying usually, but of course, there's a tradition, in some parts of Eastern Europe, right, where nihilism is accepted, right? It's part of culture. It's part of almost being mature.
It's
right?
almost stereotypical for that cultural part of the movie creators. Yes.
Yeah, and so like the Russian mentor would say, you were born and you were raised in a country that has like a smiley face on the bag, right? You are all forced to say, have a nice day, even when you're feeling terrible, even when your job is abusive, even when you are suffering, you're still supposed to say, have a nice day. And he's like, I come from a place where if people are not having a nice day, they don't say, have a nice day, because they're a little bit more honest about maybe sometimes when life isn't, an idealized, supposed to be fantasy of something, whatever that is. But, and so in my wishful thinking, of course, do I wish that they might find each other? Do I wish that when people have really, really, really difficult parents, like really difficult parents, that they could put their parents like in the woods about 300 meters away in a tent and go visit them sometimes, bring them some food, but not be harmed by them, I mean, of course, who wouldn't want life to work that way, that you could sort of solve your problems with these, tiny bit sweet solutions that don't hurt too many people. But I know that life isn't like that, so I leave it, I take a pass. I've been cheating, because you ask me this and I get much more interested in the philosophical answer of like, wow, wasn't it interesting that some people think they see each other and some people think that they don't, But okay, so my answer would be, yeah, I think it would be great if he lived a kilometer away and she saw him every now and again, or that a year that he showed up someday, or he wrote her a letter or something. But it didn't look that way. It didn't look like he had too much time left on anywhere we recognize nearby.
Thank you.
What did you think?
I have, of course, hoped for the vanilla ending, but in the end, when she hangs the food, she actually hangs it for that other person that is also living in the woods. And she also makes this sound, which is like an indirect sign that she doesn't see him. She just kind of pretends that he's there, or she does this ritual that she used to do before. So she is connected with him only spiritually, only in memory. And I think that his PTSD was so strong that probably after that separation, because he had this drive, don't be found, don't leave any traces, and we could see that even when she was involved in some previous circumstances in the movie, that he's really prepared to burn bridges, and probably this demon didn't allow him even to contact her, because it would mean a trace. And I hope that later, much later on, he kind of maybe wrote her a letter or had to see her or something like this. But I wouldn't estimate him like a person that would live a kilometer away and would regularly be coming to get oranges.
Yeah, no, I agree. You said it beautifully, and I think I happen to agree with you.
Okay, so I want to ask about the visual picture. There is a lot of green and a lot of forest. How did you and Michael McDonough, who was the director of photography, right? How did you develop the film visually?
So I really enjoy working with him, and we love to do a lookbook. And we took a lot of stills. That forest, as you saw, it has 50 shades of green. And, years ago, like, digital couldn't even do green. Digital recording couldn't handle the color green. Red and green were painful, very saturated colors. But we were excited because this forest had so many shades and so many layers. The depth was going to be beautiful. The fact that there were small juvenile trees in the foreground, adolescent, middle-sized trees next, huge trees, so just stacking layers, depth. Photographically, we thought this is going to be we have a lot to work with here. He used two kinds of lenses. He used a much sharper lens for the city, for the built world, for the bridges, the trains, buildings, bus station. And then for the forest, he used a set of lenses that were softer, that could sort of really enhance the feeling of softer forms, amorphic forms, natural forms. We had a very small footprint in terms of we didn't light up the forest ever. We used mostly reflection. We had a generator out there, but really modest, really small. And because we were going pretty deep in the woods, we were carrying our gear. We used like little golf carts, and so we were a small footprint, really. We had big trucks, but they stayed away. They were, and so you could see there's no dolly, there's no jib. The only piece of equipment that really manipulates camera was the slider. And that was the only piece. And the reason I work that way is I need all the time to be for filming. I can't lose half a day to set up because I work on a lower budget tier and I have 30 days. This was big for me because last film was 24. Film before that was 21 days. So can you imagine when you have 24 days or 21 or 30 even, how are you going to give half a day for an elaborate setup or for elaborate lighting? So for the kind of work I'm doing, I need to keep it very, really straightforward, very simple. And I used handheld mixed with tripod. And this was something that, you wonder if it's not going to work in editing, if it will be okay. But I really like to work that way because with the handheld, Michael can become very close to them. Sometimes he was using knee pads and he would just be very close to them at the fire, sort of eating with them, trying to be in their space. And other times, of course, we wanted very locked down, formal shots. So we tried to see how much, not as a stunt or as a stylistic, it's not an innovation. It's not to call attention to itself. It's really for what I call expediency, efficiency, is to combine the tools that will let us get close to them, stay with them, not use marks, and at other times still be able to show a landscape, locked down, show that it's big, show that the farm was wide and that there were hills, show that the forest was, show a wide shot, a really wide shot. And then, of course, we used long lenses when we needed to be spying on them or far away, like when they're running through the forest to run from the police officers. It was very effective for us then at that point to switch to long lenses and be able to show them deep in the branches. yeah.
So you spend a lot of time in the forest, of course, while filming. And during that time, did you meet any wild animals?
Let's see, did we meet? Well, there's a very special kind of slug it's called the banana slug. And do you know what slugs are?
Yeah, yeah.
So the skills trainer, the outdoor trainer, she had survived 45 days in that forest. And so she showed Tom and Ben how to saute those slugs so they could eat them. Ben ate them, but Tom didn't like it, you know. She's vegetarian. But let's see. You know, we did not see bears. They don't have a lot of. It wasn't the right season for snakes. Yeah, mostly just, I think, small squirrels. Squirrels were the only wild animals we saw.
So nothing dangerous.
Mountain. Maybe we saw a fox once.
Any questions from the audience? Okay. Then in the end, I would like to ask you if there is anything you would like to add to what has already been said.
Oh, well, I maybe this is too nice, but you know, I so appreciate that you guys watch the film, you know, because social realism, you know, it doesn't have explosions usually. It doesn't have, it sometimes does not have the threat of, like, you know, bodily harm. I try not to use firearms. You know, I try not to use guns in my film. So, you know, I'm trying in my work to be able to tell stories that people find relevant or interesting, but trying to do it without some of the sort of mandatory ingredients that makes a film commercial. So I think filmmakers like myself, you know, whenever we get to meet an audience that responds to this kind of alternative way of trying to make film, it's a good day. You know, it's, you know, you feel like you meet some people that you're on a wavelength with. And so, you know, I don't take that for granted.
We'd like to thank you one more time for taking the time, and it was really an excellent film. So yeah, if there are no more questions, we wish you all the best and greetings from Ljubljana. Thank you.
Thank you, and I wish you guys all the best so much with your filmmaking.